Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
UN views situation in Syria as civil war. Amnesty International accuses Saudi Arabia of wave of repression. And Yemeni forces continue to shell Taiz. Mosaic, world news from the Middle East, begins now.
In Syria, shelling by al-Assad's brigades continues to target the residents of Homs, Hama and Idlib, leading to the death of 21 people. Reports indicate regime forces in the Shabiha stormed the town of Trimse in the countryside of Hama as the opposition held a strike in a number of cities. The UN Human Rights Council announced that the death toll in Syria has exceeded 4,000 people since the eruption of the revolution, describing the situation as civil war.
The majority of Syrian cities and towns turned into ghost towns. Stores were closed and the streets semi-deserted. This comes in response to the opposition's call to hold a general strike to mourn the dead, who have been perishing daily since mid-March by the bullets of al-Assad's brigades. Wide participation in the strike was reported in all of Hama's markets and streets in support of the city's countryside that is being subjected to a bloody military operation. But despite the general strike, anti-regime protests were held on streets crowded with demonstrators demanding the downfall of President Bashar al-Assad and his regime. The Syrian Revolution's General Commission reported confrontations between Syrian security and students in the city of Daraya in the countryside of Damascus. Security forces were attempting to prevent them from holding an anti-regime march in the city. So, the students challenged the presence of armed security across Daraya's streets amid reports that al-Assad's brigades attacked those participating in another student protest. Syrian security forces fired tear gas at the students, causing some to suffer from nausea and unconsciousness. Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, said the death toll in Syria since the protest movement started has reached at least 4,000. She characterized the current situation in Syria as civil war. Amid these conditions, the leadership of the Syrian National Council confirmed the Free Syrian Army will soon start its armed operations against military, security, and political Ba'ath Party leadership sites in the heart of Damascus. The SNC said this comes in response to the massacre committed by the regime and the wide-scale security operations carried out in Syrian cities and towns. These on-the-ground developments did not constitute an obstacle to the opposition's ongoing 8-month-old revolution. For this reason, the opposition continues to mobilize its supporters, asking them to participate in mass protests on what it called the Friday of We Demand a Buffer Zone. The opposition's supporters held massive night marches in line with the mobilization taken on the Tuesday of A United Syria is Our Homeland. Opposition websites said the bullets of al-Assad's forces resulted in the deaths of at least 27 people in Homs, Idlib, Hama, and the countryside of Damascus. On the other hand, Syria announced it will suspend its membership in the Union for the Mediterranean, which was established in July 2008 under France's initiative. The official Syrian news agency, Sana, reported the freeze comes in response to the unjustified European measures taken against the Syrian people. It viewed the European Union's series of measures as a blatant violation of its national sovereignty and a clear interference in Syria's internal affairs that lacks any sort of objectivity.
It's been confirmed that the Turkish public condemns the Erdogan government's escalated moves against Syria and its people. Turks asserted that these decisions will have negative impacts on the Turkish people.
The Turks, including intellectuals and ordinary citizens, were not able to understand the hostility behind the Turkish government's position on the Syrian crisis. Most recently, the Turkish government cut off its relationship with its southern neighbor by suspending trade cooperation and halting sponsorship of projects in Syria, while claiming that these decisions will not affect the Syrian people.
A Muslim should hold hands with his Muslim brother, but unfortunately we are not doing that. We are harming our Syrian brothers for our own benefit.
Some political observers were surprised by the policy change of the Justice and Development Party in this past phase, from wanting to resolve the issue politically to using strong words such as attack, arming, no-fly zone, and isolated region.
Turkey's latest decisions are extremely wrong. Until today, we had not seen such policies in Turkey. Suddenly, this change struck. We are witnessing Turkish diplomacy within the framework of American programs. Basically, the U.S. supported the Justice and Development Party in 2002 for the sole purpose.
Meanwhile, other analysts linked the policy to the Turkish-U.S. agreement made at the expense of the Syrian people, which entails opening Turkey's door to Western forces to implement their projects. In exchange, the Turkish government was granted the freedom to act at will on the Kurdish issue in Turkish territories or in northern Iraq without being questioned about human rights.
All plans of military intervention in Syria have failed so far. Syria has a rare characteristic, the nationalism of most of its people, even among the country's opposition. Therefore, it is difficult to break the backbone of this people.
The Turkish street condemned the Turkish government's interference in Syria's internal affairs and called on the government to first resolve its issues with the Kurds and meet their demands of freedom and democracy before putting its nose in other countries' affairs. In between the attacking statements and escalating decisions, there remains an obvious question brought forth by the Turkish citizens. What caused a brother and friend to turn into an enemy overnight? The answer can be found behind the closed doors of the Turkish-U.S. meetings. Omar Ahmed, Syrian TV, Ankara. Amnesty International accused Saudi Arabia of launching a new wave of internal repressive operations to clamp down on protests linked to what's known as the Arab Spring. The organization said in a report that thousands were arrested and that prominent activists were given long prison terms without fair trials. The report focused on a draft law regarding terrorist acts, saying the law's ambiguous provisions lead to human rights violations.
A repression campaign is being conducted in the name of safety and security. This is the summary of Amnesty International's report on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's practices against its people. Saudi authorities prepared a new draft law, which they say aims to grapple with crimes of terrorism. However, Amnesty International is concerned that the law's provisions exonerate these repressive practices. For instance, the draft law considers undermining the country's reputation a terrorist crime. It also restricts freedom of speech, as the law considers any criticism directed at the Saudi king or any calls for reform acts of terrorism. The report criticized the repression of Shiite protesters in Qatif who demand equality. It also noted that a number of them were arrested for performing group prayers or celebrating certain Shiite religious occasions and were detained without trial. Arrests were also carried out against those believed to be affiliated with al-Qaeda and those who criticized the kingdom, such as Khalid al-Juhani. Khalid spoke in front of the BBC's camera, which caught the kingdom's attention. Khalid was arrested after the interview. It's believed that he was detained for 3 months in solitary confinement and was accused of supporting the demonstration and contacting foreign media networks. In addition, Amnesty International criticized the torture of detainees, the death penalty, the deprivation of women's and immigrants' rights, the abusive treatment of foreign workers, as well as the killing of armed Houthi groups in Sada in northern Yemen.
Medical sources from the field hospital at Freedom Square in the city of Taiz said 7 people were killed, including a child and a woman, and approximately 40 were wounded in last night's shelling of residential neighborhoods by forces loyal to President Ali Abdullah Saleh.
On the political front, the Yemeni Defense Ministry's website said the General People's Congress Party received 2 lists of ministerial candidates from the Revolution's National Council, based on which the unity government will be formed.
The Yemeni city of Taiz and its residents cannot have one peaceful night. Nights in Taiz are tumultuous and filled with sounds of shelling and echoes of bombs. According to medical sources in Taiz, several residents were killed and dozens of others were wounded in the shelling by President Ali Abdullah Saleh's forces that are targeting residential neighborhoods. The heavy shelling of a number of neighborhoods lasted until dawn and increased the death toll. Eyewitnesses said fighting broke out while Saleh's soldiers attempted to storm the city center, which has been bombed almost every day. Also in Taiz, the security director of the province was wounded in an exchange of gunfire between his companions and hospital guards. The security official survived the incident, but other soldiers were killed. These security developments coincide with continued efforts by Yemeni interim Prime Minister Mohammed Saad Basindwa to form a unity government. An opposition leader revealed he submitted to Yemeni Vice President Abd Rabbu Mansour al-Hadi, who is running the country in the transitional phase, the list of opposition representatives that could form the military council. According to the Gulf Initiative, the committee will be tasked with withdrawing the army from the streets and ending the current division until a unity government is formed. He indicated the lists includes 7 candidates, including the former defense minister, the former interior minister, and 5 higher-ranking military officers who pledged allegiance to the popular revolution demanding the downfall of President Saleh. UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan said the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council will not withdraw the Peninsula Shield Force deployed in Bahrain unless requested by Manama. Meanwhile, demonstrations were held across various regions in Bahrain demanding the downfall of the regime, the withdrawal of the Saudi occupation, and the release of the detainees. The demonstrators stressed the importance of continuing their popular mobilization until their demands for reform are achieved. Ibrahim Karimi was sentenced to 1 year in prison for setting up a tent at Manama Spur roundabout last March. The Bahraini opposition abroad demanded the trial of the regime's elements for crimes committed against the protesters.
The demonstrations that Bahrain has been witnessing for the past 9 months are spreading to various regions. Protesters are demanding the same rights enjoyed by people around the world, including their right to live under a democratic system. In their quest, they are being confronted by Saudi-backed security forces, which often fire live ammunition, shoes and bombs, as well as US-made poison tear gas. Under the slogan, "Victory of blood over the sword," demonstrators demand the downfall of the regime and the withdrawal of occupied Saudi forces from their country. They insist on continuing their popular mobilization until their objectives are achieved. The policy of crackdowns and arbitrary terminations adopted by the al-Khalifa regime against thousands of employees, including medics, prompted this group of protesters to come to the Ministry of Labor in the hopes of finding someone willing to listen to their complaints.
What's strange is that every ministry, institution, company, or agency is being affected by these arbitrary terminations. This includes 1 or more employees from a single company.
The judiciary also played a role in the systematic practices against the detainees, as confirmed by rights and international organizations. In the latest incident, 5 members of the Bahrain Teachers Association made their first appearance at the lower criminal court.
In conjunction,
the Bahraini opposition abroad demanded that the regime's elements be held accountable and face international justice for the heinous crimes committed against the protesters demanding freedom and democracy. In a statement, the opposition described the remarks by Qatari Foreign Minister Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani that only 5 people were killed in the protests as, quote, a shameful and blatant fabrication. The opposition referred Al Thani to the report issued by the Fact-Finding Commission, which confirms that the number of martyrs killed by the regime has reached 35 during a 2-month period.
In Kuwait, the public prosecution released the detainees accused of storming the National Assembly, which then led to a crisis that forced the cabinet to resign. This comes a day after Kuwaiti Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed al-Sabah appointed the defense minister of the ousted government, Sheikh Jaber al-Mubarak al-Sabah, as the new prime minister, succeeding Sheikh Nasser Mohammed al-Ahmed. Meanwhile, the parliament's fate is not yet clear. Many believe this move may help ease political tension. Ahmed al-Anazi reports from Kuwait.
After Sheikh Nasser Mohammed al-Sabah's 7th government submitted its resignation 2 days ago, his deputy and defense minister, Sheikh Jaber al-Mubarak, was appointed by a royal decree as the new prime minister. The new premier is to choose the members of his government in the next few days and have them approved by the Emir of Kuwait.
There is no doubt that replacing the prime minister was one of the demands of the political and popular parties, whether it is Sheikh Jaber al-Mubarak or someone else. But we should not forget other demands of the political and popular parties, which is the reason why a number of demonstrations broke out at Irada Square recently.
For its part, the opposition appeared to be relaxed and enjoying a delayed victory after one of its most important demands was met, the replacement of the prime minister. Meanwhile, the National Assembly's fate remains undecided, as another royal decree is expected to end the long-term controversy. I
believe that part of the solution is to dissolve Parliament. All signs indicate that it will be dissolved soon. I don't believe that maintaining the incumbent Parliament will be a good thing for solving the problems. Instead, it will create more imbalances in Kuwait's political equation.
At the moment, Sheikh Jaber al-Mubarak's appointment as head of the cabinet is gaining partial consensus on the street and in parliament because of his good relationship with the majority of political parties, which represent all social stratums in Kuwait. Kuwaitis have long awaited the Emir's latest decision, which was made in order to put an end to a difficult political phase. Many believe that the move will take Kuwait out of the crises that swept the country all at once, which exhausted the public and paralyzed many political issues. Ahmed al-Anazi, Dubai TV, Kuwait.
Now the news: U.S.-led NATO forces have killed 2 Pakistani men over the border in Afghanistan. The 2 men from a border area on the Pakistani side were gathering wood inside Afghanistan. The killings come as relations between Islamabad and the U.S. are already tense over the recent deadly airstrikes by the military alliance in Pakistan. Islamabad has strongly condemned NATO over the attacks that killed 24 Pakistani soldiers over the weekend. NATO says its helicopters and jet fighters launched the air attacks after they mistook the soldiers manning Pakistani army posts with militants. This is while the U.S. says militants may have deliberately tried to provoke a cross-border firefight. Earlier, we spoke to our correspondent Javed Rana in Islamabad for more details on the tense relations between Pakistan and the United States.
The NATO supply line, according to Pakistan's Interior Minister, has been permanently blocked, and Pakistan has already asked the US to vacate one of the southwestern air bases from where the drones were operating by December 11. That explains that the alliance does not exist, but still there are other bases, particularly in Pakistan, Sindh province. Jacobabad Air Base still is in the control of the US, from where they are providing so-called logistical support to the so-called war on terror. I can say the kind of the situation in Pakistan is there that it appears that since they have divergent interests in Afghanistan, in coming weeks and coming days, probably it will be difficult for both sides until Americans go for a written agreement with Pakistan on in what manner they can have engagements in this so-called war on terror.
Jabir Rana talking to us earlier. Meanwhile, hundreds of Afghans have taken to the streets in the capital, Kabul, voicing their anger over a strategic pact between Kabul and Washington. They called for an immediate withdrawal of all foreign troops from their country. They were also angry over the killings of civilians of U.S.-led NATO forces. The protesters said signing of the strategic agreement would put the lives of thousands of Afghans at risk and allow permanent bases for the U.S. military. Afghan political figures have opposed signing the agreements with the U.S. in recent weeks. This is Afghan troops are preparing to take over full security responsibilities from foreign troops by a 2014 deadline. A mob has gathered outside the Iranian embassy in the British capital, London, as diplomats are preparing to leave the country. The Iranian Foreign Ministry says they gathered outside the Iranian diplomatic residence in a coordinated move. It says the crowd has caused disturbances for the diplomatic staff preparing to leave Britain following the closure of the Iranian embassy. This is while the staffers have another day to leave British soil. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has called on Britain to protect the mission and to immediately stop the disturbances so the diplomats can leave British soil ahead of the 48-hour deadline. On Wednesday, in the Swiss capital Bern, assailants attacked the Iranian embassy with stones and Molotov cocktails, damaging part of the compound. Police were at the scene 10 minutes after the alarm went off. Bern says it's launched a probe into the incidents. European Union foreign ministers have issued a statement condemning the storming of the British embassy in Tehran. Britain was hoping it could prompt the 27-member bloc to take a drastic measure against Iran, including an en masse pullout of the EU's ambassadors or an oil embargo. Well, to discuss the development, I'm now joined on the line from Tehran by Professor of Tehran University, Mohammad Marandi. Mr. Marandi, how do you see Britain's failure to rally EU support for a very tough measure against Iran?
Pretty clear that European Union countries, despite the bluster, they need Iran more than Iran needs them. At the end of the day, if they cease to purchase Iranian oil, it will take them a very long time to find alternative sources. And the Iranians have customers throughout the world. There is no oversupply of oil. So they'll basically be shooting themselves in the feet if they enact such sanctions. But what is interesting is that how the British and the Europeans, in general, their attempts have been to hurt ordinary Iranians. The sanctions that the British imposed, which led to the events in the British embassy, were basically an attempt to hurt the Iranian middle class, ordinary Iranians.
Defense Minister Ehud Barak said today that an Israeli attack on Iran is not imminent, but all options remain open to stop Tehran's bid to develop nuclear weapons. This as EU foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels to exert further economic pressure on the hardline Islamic Republic. IBA's Eli Wagalanter has that story.
Defense Minister Ehud Barak says Israel has no desire to go to war with Iran over its nuclear program, but warns that at some point there may be no other option. We have no intention, at the moment, of taking action, but the state of Israel is far from being paralyzed by fear, Barak told Israel Radio. It must act calmly and quietly. We don't need big wars. Barak says Israel would be very glad if sanctions and diplomacy would lead Iran to abandon its suspected nuclear weapons program, but that he doesn't think that will happen. Barak was also asked about remarks by U.S. General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who, when asked yesterday whether Israel would alert the United States ahead of time if it chose to go forward with military action against Iran, replied flatly, "I don't know." Barak said Israel greatly respects the United States and maintains a continuous dialogue with its main ally on security issues. But, the defense minister said, one must remember that ultimately Israel is a sovereign nation, and the Israeli government, defense forces, and security services, not others, are responsible for Israel's security, future, and existence. Meanwhile, in Brussels, ahead of a meeting of EU foreign ministers, British Foreign Secretary William Hague has called for more sanctions against Iran to increase the isolation of the regime from the international community.
I hope we will agree today additional measures that will be an intensification of the economic pressure on Iran, peaceful, legitimate economic pressure, particularly to increase the isolation of the Iranian financial sector. But that, of course, is to be discussed at the meeting.
Haig acknowledged that there would be a variety of views among his EU counterparts on whether to ban Iranian oil imports. Haig repeated his thanks for the support of member states, including Germany, France, and the Netherlands, which have withdrawn their ambassadors from Iran in solidarity following the attack on the UK embassy in Tehran on Tuesday. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton said there was widening support for new sanctions.
On Iran, it's a case of adding more. You know, we've been working to, if you like, ratchet up the sanctions to make it clear to Iran that we are very serious about it. Always serious on the nuclear issue, by the way, on the twin track approach. You know that I'm still waiting for a reply.
Are we talking about oil sanctions?
We're talking about a range of sanctions. It will be decided today exactly what those sanctions should be.
Meanwhile, Iran has released 11 hardline students held for storming the British embassy. There was no immediate explanation for the students' release.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Now on U.S. airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.